The place looked somewhat old-fashioned but modern at the same time. Someone was on the stage singing and playing the guitar, while others conversed with their partners at their various tables while drinking whatever they had in their glasses. "I have a favorite spot where I like to sit and enjoy the view," Tom said as he led the way to a table at the distal end of the hall. Lucy noticed that from where they sat they could see almost every part of the bar. "Cool, right?" Tom asked when he noticed she was still looking around the place, undecided. Lucy said as she returned her attention to him, "Could that be handy, Tom?" A chubby blonde waitress who looked like she was in her mid-20s questioned as she strutted towards them. "If he looks like Tom, then he definitely is Tom," Tom said with a wink, making her raise a hand to her lips which were painted red. "You know, I was in doubt when you walked in. But when I saw you heading to this spot with this beautiful lady beside you, I decided it has to be you." "OMG, Tom. You look like you just walked out of my fantasy," she said with a dreamy smile. "Do I look good enough to snatch you from your husband now?" Tom asked playfully, wiggling his brow. "You sure do. As long as you don't mind changing diapers," the waitress said, rubbing her abdomen. That was when Lucy noticed the wedding band on her finger and her barely noticeable baby bump. "Just get me a good divorce lawyer and I will elope with you." "But wait, hope your lady won't mind?" she asked, looking at Lucy with mock alarm. "I'm sure she won't," Tom said with a wink. "Trisha, meet my neighbor, Lucy." "Lucy, meet Trisha, the love of my life and my favorite waitress in all of Lidus," Tom introduced, grateful that no one here knew his true identity. "Neighbors?" "I see," Trisha said as she looked from Tom to Lucy. "It's nice to meet you," Trisha said with a friendly smile, and Lucy returned her smile. "You seem like a regular here," Lucy told Tom after Trisha had taken their orders and left. "I'm pretty outgoing." "That's how I get my clients," Tom said, which was also partially true in a way. He frequented pubs, clubs, and bars where people often gathered, and he tried to engage in different conversations to gain information about what people thought about his company and services and also get ideas. Everywhere he went he simply introduced himself as Handy Tom, and that was all they knew about him. "Nice. So about your lady, let's talk about her later. I'm curious about something. Have you ever been in a relationship?" Tom asked, cutting her off. "If you're asking because you're worried I won't be able to advise you because of that, you have nothing to worry about. I have a wealth of experience from my twin brother and my best friends," Lucy assured him. Tom looked at her, slightly amused. It seemed like she was in a haste to help him win her heart. "No. I'm asking because I would like to understand why you chose to be single. Did something happen?" No matter how hard he thought about it, it just didn't make sense that a lady with no prior relationship experience would just choose to be single for no reason. "I don't want to talk about it," Lucy said, and was grateful when the waitress chose that moment to bring their order to the table. Tom watched her and could tell he had been right. There was a story there. Something must have made her decide she was better off without men, and he intended to find out what that was. "So what would you like to talk about that doesn't involve my love interest?" Tom asked after the waitress left. "I thought she was the reason you dragged me out because you wanted us to talk about her?" Lucy asked with a slightly raised brow before picking up her glass of cocktail and sipping from it. "No. I dragged you out because I was bored and wanted to spend some time with someone outdoors," Tom corrected as he raised his glass of cocktail to his lips and took a sip. "So don't you think the earlier we strategize on how to get her, the better for you? At least once you get a girlfriend you'll be too busy to be bored," Lucy said, raising both brows with a stiff smile on her face as she used her right hand to push her glasses up her nose, while her left hand held the glass. That explained why she was so eager to talk to him about it, Tom mused. "Shouldn't you take off your glasses? Or do you need them to see me?" Tom asked, realizing he had no idea as to how bad her sight defect was. "As I said before, I feel more comfortable wearing them." "So neighbor, why don't you tell me about yourself? You already know I have a twin brother, and you even know my best friend's name, yet the only thing I know about you is your name, where you live, what you do, and the fact that you are interested in a woman whose name you don't know," Lucy said, before taking a long sip from her glass, and winced a bit at the bittersweet taste. Tom could tell she was trying to shift the conversations from herself to him. "Let's see. I have 2 younger siblings, a guy and a girl. I have 2 really close friends, Jonas and Tyler. What else? Lucy looked at him, and even though a voice in her head kept telling her it was a bad idea to voice the question on her mind, she went ahead to ask anyway. Do you always hook up with random women at the club? The corners of his lips twitched in amusement, but he tried not to smile as he looked at her. You're sure you want us to talk about that? Well, we are friendly neighbors, aren't we? What harm could come from it? She asked with a shrug as she kept her empty glass, and picked up another one, and took a long sip. Let's do it this way. If I answer your question, then you have to answer one of mine too, Tom suggested. As long as your question has nothing to do with why I'm not in a relationship, then I'm game. Alright then. No. I don't always hook up with random women. So what? I answered your question, so it is my turn, Tom said with a grin. But I'm not satisfied. No buts, boss. It is my turn. Lucy looked at him as though she wanted to argue, but picked up her glass again and downed the content before flashing him a smile. Okay. Fine. Go on and ask your question. I'm all ears, Lucy said as she nursed her now empty glass of cocktail. Tom signaled to Trisha to serve them again. If he was to judge by the first night at the club, then he knew without a doubt that at the pace she was going, she was likely going to getting drunk soon. That was good enough for him since he knew she was the type to loosen up and talk a lot when drunk. What is your favorite color? Tom asked, catching her off guard since she had been expecting something very personal. He almost smiled when he noticed the flicker of surprise on her face. Who did she think she was dealing with? I love colors generally, and my color preference at any point is subject to the object. So I'm afraid I can't give you a definite answer, Lucy explained and waited for him to ask her to explain further. He understood what she meant, but looking at her face he also knew she wanted him to probe further, so he decided not to. I see, Tom said with a nod, and she pursed her lips as she tried to figure him out. Okay, I can continue with my question. Why don't we set some ground rules between us? Tom asked, interrupting her. Lucy tilted her head back and blinked at Tom. Ground rules? What ground rules? She asked as though she was struggling to understand and keep up with what he was saying. One end of Tom's lips twitched. Yeah. You only get to ask a question once. And you can't continue from where you stopped or generate another question from my response, Tom said, and Lucy rolled her eyes. How boring, she muttered as Trisha returned to their table with their drink. Thanks, both Tom and Lucy told her before she left. It amused Tom that someone like her would refer to anyone else as boring. So are you in or not? Lucy picked up another glass against her better sense of judgment and started drinking from it out of habit. It seemed to Tom like once she started drinking, she couldn't bring herself to stop until she was done. When she was done, she dropped the glass on the table and grinned at him as if something was amusing her. Of course, I'm in. She couldn't help noticing that her voice was beginning to sound foreign to her. She was gradually beginning to feel lightheaded, and she could tell that she was on her way to becoming drunk. For someone aware of her low alcohol tolerance, it amazed her that she kept drinking alcohol even when she didn't need it anymore. Tom had expected her to insist on adding her own ground rules too, but it appeared like being tipsy was affecting her ability to think straight. Or maybe it was making her bold and daring. I suggest you carefully think about your questions. She waved both hands to stop him. Worry about yourself instead. So I'm asking the next question, right? Lucy asked, narrowing her eyes at him. Yes, you are, Tom said as he raised his glass to his lips and sipped from it. He was still on his second glass while she was going to her fourth. He watched her with interest as a rosy blush flushed her cheeks, and he couldn't help wondering what she wanted to ask him that embarrassed her that much. Did you? She closed her eyes as she tried to summon up courage. Did you use a company? Condom? I mean that night? She blurted out, without looking at him directly. Tom tried hard to maintain a straight face, and the only indication of his amusement was the gleam in his eyes as his body shook with laughter. No, I didn't, he said as he watched her over the rim of his wineglass. Lucy gasped as she glanced at him. What? You didn't? How can you have unprotected sex with a stranger? Lucy asked in panic. Tom smiled. It's my turn, he said in a calm voice, ignoring her question. But, have you ever been in love? Lucy stiffened for a brief moment. I said don't ask me anything about my past. Lucy said testily. For someone who was close to tipsy, she was still very alert. Tom noted. That wasn't what you said. You said I shouldn't ask why you're not in a relationship, and my question has nothing to do with that, Tom said with a wide smile. Different emotions flickered in her eyes and Lucy opened her mouth to argue, but then decided not to bother with it. I don't know. Maybe. I guess so, she said with a sad sigh as though she didn't want to dwell on it. That is a lot of answers for a simple question of yes or no, Tom observed. Yeah. Sorry, she said wearily, making Tom frown. He didn't like the sadness he could sense in her words, neither did he like the thought that he might have reminded her of a sad memory. You don't have to be. I'm sorry if I reminded you of an unpleasant memory, Tom said apologetically. Lucy heaved a long sigh. It's okay. Let's just call it a night and go home. I should sleep, Lucy said, glancing at her wristwatch. Tom couldn't help wondering what was wrong. He wished he could ask her about it, but he knew it was probably the reason she had said he shouldn't ask her why she wasn't in a relationship, so he gave her a nod. Okay, he said as he took out some money notes from his wallet and dropped them on the table before standing up. He offered his hand to help her stand up, and she placed her small hand in his and allowed him to pull her up. Tom looked down at their intertwined hands, before drawing her closer to his side, and then leading her out of the bar. I love the cool evening breeze, Lucy commented once they were out and she inhaled fresh air which was unlike that in the stuffy interior of the bar where the smell of sweat mingled with that of food. Alcohol and different perfumes. You want to sit out here before we leave? He asked her thoughtfully as they walked over to where the car was parked, and she nodded. Without asking, Tom placed both hands on her waist and lifted her off the ground and on top of the car trunk. Lucy, who had been alarmed when he touched her without warning, relaxed when she realized what he was doing. Once she was seated, he jumped on the space beside her. She rested her back on the rear windshield of the car looking at the night sky above them which was decorated by a full moon and so many stars, while they sat under it in comfortable silence. Although she was slightly tipsy, she was calm. Tom? She called after some time. Yeah? Tom, who had been trying to guess what she was thinking, or whether she had dozed off, turned to look at her. I'm sorry, what for? Lucy shifted her gaze from the sky to his face. I think I almost cost you your job today, she confessed, making his brow pull together in surprise. He hadn't expected her to confide in him about that. What happened? I asked Mr. Harry to give me a different driver. I didn't want you, she explained, looking at him guiltily. You dislike me that much? Tom asked with a slight frown, and she shook her head. It's not that. I think you're pretty cool, and that is why I'm telling you this. I will try to be a better friend henceforth, Lucy promised, and Tom was the one to feel guilty now, but he didn't let it affect him too much. So what happened? Did he change your mind? Tom asked with an expressionless face. Lucy shook her head. The CEO got involved and insisted that if you leave, I will lose my job. So I guess I'm stuck with you, Lucy said with derogatory laughter directed at herself. Is that why you agreed to all I said at the grocery shop? Because you didn't want me to quit? Tom asked with narrowed eyes, and she giggled. Honestly? Yes. I hope you won't take advantage of that and start making absurd demands. Tom smiled. I can't promise you that I won't take advantage of it, but I can assure you that I won't ask you to do something that you can't do. Fair enough. I owe you that much. So, friends for real now? She asked, extending her hand for a handshake. Tom took her hands. Friends. At least for now, he added to himself. By the way, I was going to ask you why you picked out just Bounty chocolates earlier, Tom said, sparing her a glance as he drove them home. Because it is the only chocolate I enjoy, probably because of the coconut in it, Lucy explained, and picked up her phone when she received a text notification from Harry. I see. Reminder that you're to resume at the CEO's office tomorrow morning. Lucy sighed as she read the text. What is wrong? Tom asked on hearing her sigh. I should probably let you know that I'm resuming at the CEO's office tomorrow. You mean you will be working directly for the CEO now? That is so cool. Congrats. Tom said with a big smile as he drove into the parking lot of their apartment building. I'm not sure it is cool. I don't even know what he looks like. I just think someone like him that loves to stay hidden must be a difficult man to please. I just know he is going to make my life difficult somehow, Lucy complained as they both got out of the car. I'm sure he isn't bad looking. Although I overheard another driver say the CEO likes to communicate via texts and emails, so it's probably best you check your messages and emails frequently. Don't worry. I'm sure you'll do great, Tom assured her as they stopped in front of her apartment and she took out her keys to open the door. See you tomorrow, boss, Tom said with a wave once she stepped inside her house, and then he walked away. Good night, she called after him before shutting the door. She took off her shoes and walked barefooted to her refrigerator. She picked up 2 Bounty chocolates, unwrapped one and bit from it before walking over to sit on her couch. Once she was seated, she took off her glasses and kept them on the table before taking another bite from the chocolate. Her thoughts drifted to Tom as she slowly chewed, and she wondered if she had been too hasty in offering her friendship. She had done that only because she wanted things to be less awkward between them now that she knew she had no choice but to work with him and keep him from quitting in order to save her job. And also because she was now certain that he had no interest in her but rather in someone else. Although he seemed like a nice guy, she couldn't help being bothered by the fact that he hadn't been embarrassed or apologetic when she asked him why he hadn't used a condom. Should she be worried about a sexually transmitted infection or disease? Maybe she would just have to go for a medical test so that she could put her mind at ease. She sighed as she took another bite from her chocolate. She remembered that she had promised to call Sonia back, so she picked up her phone and dialed Sonia's line. She was glad that she had a friend like Sonia who was willing to take her call no matter the hour of the day she called, or the number of times she called. Sonia, who was busy scribbling down something on her jotter, looked around disoriented when she heard a vibration, and it took her a moment to remember she had placed her phone on vibration to avoid distraction. She yawned as she reached for her phone, and smiled when she saw it was Lucy. "Hey baby, I hope I'm not interrupting something?" Lucy asked in a concerned tone. "You know I can always put whatever I'm doing on hold to chat with you. So talk to me baby, what's up?" Sonia asked, waiting for an exciting update. "Well, first of all, my driver had a makeover," Lucy said, standing up from the couch to walk into her bedroom in fear that Tom might walk past her door and overhear her side of the conversation. "A makeover?" Sonia repeated, knowing that for Lucy to be talking about it, then it probably affected her in a way. "You heard right. Like he went from looking like a gentleman to looking like a bad playboy." Lucy went on to describe his new look as she got into her bedroom and sat on her bed. "OMG. I can't see him, but that sounds so hot." Sonia squealed in excitement. "I'm sure all the ladies who set eyes on him would agree with you." "They all kept staring at him," Lucy said in amusement. "You inclusive, right?" Sonia asked in a teasing tone. "Of course not. He is my driver," Lucy lied. N0V3LTR0VE served as the original host for this chapter's release on N0V3LB1N, and your ex one night stand. "And your neighbor too," Sonia countered. "Those doesn't count. Besides, he is thankfully not interested in me. Apparently he took the job at the company, and had a makeover because of a lady he is interested in at the company." "So there goes your perfect romance story," Lucy said with a roll of her eyes. "He told you that?" Sonia asked doubtfully as she stood up to stretch her body, which was feeling cramped due to the long hours she had spent sitting. "Of course he did. He even asked me to help him get her," Lucy added, making Sonia hiss angrily. "What? He is such a jerk. How can he ask you to do that after what you both had?" She couldn't believe she had been hoping the jerk would be the one to finally make Lucy change her mind about relationships. "We had nothing. It was a one-time thing, remember?" Lucy said in his defense. "I can't believe you're even defending him right now. So what did you tell him? Did you agree to do it?" Sonia asked, hoping the response would be negative. "Of course I did. We even went grocery shopping together, and we just returned from a bar. Remember, I have to make sure he keeps working for me, else I lose my job. So I'm keeping him as a friend. He's a cool guy," Lucy explained. On hearing that she had gone grocery shopping with him, and even to a bar, Sonia felt optimistic. "I still don't like him, don't worry about me. He's cool. Besides, it's a win-win. By becoming friends with him and helping him get the lady, I get to keep my job, and that way I also don't have to worry about him making advances at me," Lucy said. "As long as you don't get hurt, I suppose I'm fine. Now that aside, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Don't you think it's high time you get a boyfriend?" Sonia asked, her tone becoming serious. "Nah. I don't need the distraction," Lucy said dismissively. "Stop with the excuse already. I understand why you're hellbent on staying single. But don't you think you have punished yourself enough? You should let it go," Sonia said softly. Lucy was quiet for some seconds, and then heaved a long sigh. "I'm not ready for any emotional commitment." "What about your fiancé?" Lucy asked, changing the subject. "Don't do that, Lou. I'm not letting you change the subject. You don't have to be ready for an emotional commitment. I understand that love might happen instantaneously for some, while it takes time for others to fall in love. I'm just asking that you open yourself to being in a relationship, be it friends with benefits or a real relationship, Sonia pleaded, TSK. It's not like you're in a relationship yourself, at least I have a lot of ex-boyfriends. And even a fake fiancé. I think you should start meeting guys until you see one you like, Sonia suggested. You don't have to give me an answer at once. Rather than refuse immediately, you can just think about it, Sonia quickly added when Lucy remained quiet. I should go to bed. I love you. Good night. With that, Lucy hung up. Tom stepped out of the shower with a towel tied around his waist and another in his hand, which he used to dry his hair, as he walked over to the bed to pick up his phone, which had been ringing all the while he was in the shower. The missed calls were from Harry and Brian. He dialed Brian's number and connected the phone to his AirPod before leaving the phone on the bed and walking over to the drawer to pick a boxer and shirt. Sorry, I missed your call. I was in the shower when you called, Tom explained once the call connected. That's okay. I just got tired of waiting to hear from you. By the way, my assistant is sending your costume tomorrow morning. Where do you want it? Brian asked. Wanting to get that out of the way before getting into the lecture for the night, it should be sent to the office. Harry will receive it on my behalf, Tom said as he put on his boxers and shirt and walked out of the bedroom to the kitchen, where he picked up a glass and filled it with water from the water dispenser before going to the living room to sit on the couch. Okay. So tell me, how did your outing go? By the way, you're yet to send the makeover pictures, Brian reminded him. Don't worry. I will just do that after the call. How is your fiancée? Brian's heart skipped at the mention of that. She is fine. So? Tell me exactly how she reacted to the makeover, Brian said. Wanting to change the subject, Tom smiled at the memory. She tried not to let it show, but I caught her staring. And I think I may have slipped. She asked me why I had a makeover, and I told her there is a lady at the office who I'm interested in, and I think she might be into the whole bad boy package, Tom explained, making Brian's brow pull together. You're supposed to be making her feel you're a bad boy, not making her think you're a simp who is trying to be what he is not to get a lady. Yeah. I know. But after telling her that, I also noticed she relaxed around me. It's as if knowing now that I'm interested in someone else, she is more willing to be friends with me, Tom explained. That is how you get yourself friend-zoned. Brian pointed out, I have no intention of being friend-zoned. I managed to convince her I wasn't interested in her, and she agreed to help me get the lady I'm interested in. So don't worry, I'm sure she will give me good enough tips on how to get her, Tom explained, and Brian chuckled. Believe me. She is going to be mad when she eventually finds out that you have been making a fool out of her, Brian said confidently. Well, she hasn't left me much choice, has she? That reminds me. Were you able to pitch the whole text and email thing to her? Brian asked thoughtfully. They had both spoken earlier before Tom's outing with Lucy. Brian had called to find out Tom's preferred color of contact lens, and then Brian had mentioned that Lucy would easily recognize his voice if she heard him speak. Earlier, that's right. Tom had said, realizing that he hadn't really thought of the voice recognition, and had only focused his attention on his physical appearance. So you should play the role of the boss who doesn't talk to his employees. You don't have to speak to her when you're at the office, Brian had suggested. You don't think it would seem weird? Tom had asked thoughtfully. You are the boss whose face the majority of his employees don't know. What could be weirder than that? Brian had asked dryly, making Tom laugh. I'm sure she would assume you just have a bad personality. I suppose you're right. I could just communicate with her via emails and texts. Tom had suggested. Exactly. That makes more sense. And maybe you could try to seduce her too, and see who gets her first, the boss or the driver. What do you think? Brian had suggested. That would be doing too much, don't you think? Tom had asked, even though the idea seemed appealing to him. Present. Yeah, I told her to check her texts and emails often, Tom told him. So your assignment for tomorrow you have to make her see you with another girl. Preferably someone hot. Invite a lady over, or better still, approach another lady in front of her, Brian suggested, making Tom frown. I don't think that is a good idea. I told her I'm interested in someone already, remember? Yes, you did. But remember you're playing the bad boy role? If she confronts you, you could just give her a flippant answer about a man having his needs, and how you can't deprive yourself of your basic needs when you don't even know if the lady in question is going to reciprocate your feelings. You catch my drift? Brian asked. Tell me again, how did your fiancé win your heart to make you quit your playboy ways? Tom asked incredulously. Brian laughed out loud. I'm good, right? I know, you're sure this won't make her keep her distance, trust me, it's going to make her even more curious about a lot of things. You said she has become more friendly towards you. Right? Why should she worry about a playboy friend? Brian asked, and Tom nodded in agreement. I guess you're right. I'll do that. Good. So make sure you report tomorrow. And let me know when you get the costumes, Brian added before hanging up. Brian looked around the house with a bored expression on his face. He needed to get out soon, else he would die. But the question now was, where could he go to? He definitely couldn't be seen in public with another lady after only just proposing to one. He would have invited some girls over, but with the way his penthouse was being watched by many eyes, he knew there was no way it wouldn't make the news. He dialed Mia's line. Have you? No. We are still trying to find her, Mia interrupted, knowing why he was calling. How can it be so difficult to find just one damn person? Brian yelled at her in frustration. Mia pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to tell him to go find Sonia himself if he thought it was such an easy task. She didn't ask him to propose to a stranger, after all, so why was he taking his frustration out on her? We are doing all we can while trying to be discreet. We can't let people know you proposed to a stranger, Mia pointed out, making Brian raise a hand to massage his temple. If only he could remember the name of her editor. Or maybe he could. Mia? Can you get me some of her books? Go over to any bookstore around you and find me some of her books, Brian said excitedly. Can't you just download soft copies online if it is urgent? Mia suggested politely. Since she was getting ready for a date and didn't want to be late, no. I prefer hard copies. I'll be waiting, he said and hung up immediately. Maybe he could read her books to kill his boredom while understanding her crazy personality from the way she writes. And who knows? Maybe he could get her editor's information from the book. Why hadn't he thought of that all along? Mia was burning with anger by the time her cab pulled to a stop in front of Brian's penthouse. She had had to cancel her date because of the books he had asked her to get. She had gone from one bookstore to the other searching for it, and by the time she finally found it, the time was far spent already. She didn't need to knock since she knew his passcode already in case of any emergency, so she unlocked the door herself and walked into his apartment. She pasted a stiff smile on her face as she approached where he was seated by the dining, tapping away on his laptop. Here are the books you requested for, she said, dropping them beside him on the couch. You can leave, Brian said without sparing her a glance as he continued with what he was doing. N0V3LTR0V served as the original host for this chapter's release on No V3LB1N. Mia remained where she was, waiting for him to at least raise his head and acknowledge her presence, but when he didn't after a while she shook her head and headed for the door, promising herself that she was going to quit her job after receiving her next paycheck. Mia? Brian called before she got to the door, and she turned to look at him with a stony expression. Brian raised a brow when he noticed the makeup on her face. I don't assume you're going out on a date, are you? Brian asked, eyeing her outfit. I was, but had to cancel because of your important books that couldn't wait, she said grudgingly. A boyfriend or a blind date? Brian asked since he had no idea whether or not she was in a relationship. He was not the type to get himself involved in the business of his staff. Mia's brows pulled together in confusion. Blind date, she said, waiting to hear why he was asking and what he wanted to say. Well, you should be thankful I made you cancel. Your blind date would have gone in the opposite direction after taking one look at you in that hideous outfit, Brian said, looking her over with disapproval. What is wrong with what I'm wearing? Mia asked in confusion. Your colors are mismatched and the skirt is plain ugly with too many ruffles. Seeing your skirt, I'm glad you only wear suit pants to work, Brian said as his eyes fell on the books which she had dropped. Mia looked down at her clothes uncertainly. She didn't know what to say to him, so she pressed her lips together. She liked to believe that she was a fashionista, and maybe he was saying that simply because he didn't understand female fashion. When next you have a date, let me know beforehand, and maybe we can get you something better to wear to make up for making you cancel your date plans. And that way I don't interfere with your plans next time, Brian said, and Mia felt her anger dissipate. That was something she was getting to learn about Brian. He could be insensitive and sensitive at the same time. It was only because of times like this when he acted like a decent person that she has been able to keep working for him for the past 18 months. Thank you, Mia murmured as she turned to leave, knowing that was as good as an apology that she could hope for. Don't forget to send the package to my brother's office tomorrow. The name on the package should be Harry Jonas, Brian said. I haven't forgotten, Mia assured him. All right. Thank you, Brian said dismissively as he picked up one of Sonia's novels. There was a picture of her at the back. She was dressed in a white strapless gown, and her long blonde hair was packed in a ponytail while she smiled directly at the camera, her green eyes gleaming with mischief. Pretty psycho, he muttered as he gazed at her picture. A small frown creased his forehead when his eyes fell on the short note which was written about the author, but contained next to nothing about her as a person but more about her as an author and her other books. You love to stay hidden, huh? Brian asked no one in particular as he flipped open the book to see if he could get any information on the publisher and editor. Good enough, he got information on the publishing company, and scribbled it down on his notepad. He was going to contact them tomorrow, since it was late in the evening already. For now, he would just immerse himself in the book and see what surprises his psycho fiancée had between the pages. The particular novel he was reading was a fantasy novel. The title of the story was The Witch and Her Hunter. It was about a king who abolished the use of sorcery and magic within the kingdom because of evil witches and set up a committee of hunters which consisted of the most powerful men in the kingdom. He ordered the execution of the leader of a coven when she was caught using sorcery to save her daughter's life. The leader of the coven had mismatched eyes of blue and green, and just before she was executed she told the king she would love to see how he would execute his own child. Some weeks after her death, the king found out his barren wife was pregnant, and months later she gave birth to a beautiful girl with mismatched eyes of blue and green. Knowing what this meant and that his barren queen would never accept for their only child to be executed, they proceeded to keep her hidden from the public, and the palace staff was made to keep the colors of the princess's eyes a secret. One day the little princess snuck out of the palace in search of playmates, and all the other kids ran from her when they saw her eyes. Tearfully she returned to the palace, and her mother, realizing that her identity has been exposed, ran away with her from the palace before she could be gotten by the witch hunters. She took her to a cave where she had been told other witches were hiding and handed her to them. The witches, knowing the little girl was the reincarnation of their coven leader, used her energy to open a portal through which they escaped from the kingdom where they were being hunted. Into the future, soon Brian found himself engrossed in the story. He decided he would love to have it adapted as a movie because the storyline was very interesting. Wow! She's good, Brian murmured as he continued reading. He wondered if she was into screenwriting, and made a mental note to recommend her books to some movie producers he knew.